So, what if the very DNA inside you held a kind of hidden record?
A hidden record? What do you mean exactly?
Well, not just, your immediate family tree, but something much bigger. Think ancient empires,
Mm-hmm.
huge explorations, even things like historical persecutions.
Ah, okay. Like a deeper historical narrative written in our genes.
Exactly. We're talking about a genetic story that researchers have found is incredibly diverse, really resilient, but also, as our sources show, it carries some pretty profound, maybe even controversial implications.
It sounds almost like science fiction, doesn't it? But for certain groups, this genetic story is actually vividly present right there in their cells.
Absolutely. And today we're doing a deep dive into one of the most fascinating examples of this. It's often referred to by researchers as the Portugal gene.
Right.
Our mission, really, is to unpack how one of Europe's smallest nations could possibly carry one of its most complex genetic identities. We want to trace that story from, say, Paleolithic cave dwellers right up to the age of exploration.
So we're pulling out the key findings from the research.
Yes, precisely. We'll extract the most important bits from the research you shared, helping you understand this incredible journey written into Portuguese bloodlines.
It truly is a journey through centuries, layer upon layer of history. And it reveals a genetic profile that, well, scientists often describe it as a testament to survival, to blending, and just the sheer tenacity of human movement over time.
So it's clear this isn't just about the cold, hard science of genetics.
Not at all.
It's really a gripping story about history, about identity, and the surprising, sometimes uncomfortable ways they're connected. Let's unpack this.
Okay. So what's really striking here, I think, is how the Portuguese gene pool isn't just one straight line. It's more like a rich mosaic.
Mosaic, okay. Made of what?
Well, researchers have found it's this unique mix. You've got the ancient Iberian hunter-gatherer ancestry going back maybe 15,000 years or more.
Wow, that's deep history.
It is. But then, significantly, it's enriched by North African Berber DNA. That seems to have been largely introduced during the Moorish occupation, between about 711 and 1249 CE.
Right, the Al-Andalus period influence. So that's a really powerful layer there.
A huge layer.
But the story of Portugal's genetic past doesn't stop there, does it?
Yeah.
According to the sources, what other major threads are woven into this tapestry?
No, it's more complex. Beyond that North African influence, geneticists also point to really strong Sephardic Jewish lineages.
Ah, yes.
These were very present in Portugal for centuries, right up until the forced conversions and eventually the expulsions in the 15th and 16th centuries, which dramatically reshaped the population.
And if we zoom out a bit, Portugal wasn't just receiving these genetic influences, right?
Yeah.
They were also exporting them on a massive scale.
That's a crucial point. During that same period, roughly 15th to 18th centuries, you had over 1 million Portuguese settlers, sailors, soldiers.
Over 1 million.
Yes, actively spreading their genes across 4 continents. It was part of their huge colonial empire. The sheer scale of that genetic export is just, well, staggering when you think about it.
It really is. How do researchers even start to quantify something that vast happening over centuries?
It takes really meticulous genomic studies. For example, one recent study you shared suggested that modern Portuguese people actually share more DNA with North Africans than almost any other Western European group.
More than almost any other. That's surprising.
It is surprising, and it's not just a minor observation. It fundamentally sort of shifts how we might think about Western European genetic profiles. It shows Portugal as this kind of outlier, a direct result of centuries of that Southern influence and mixing.
That really drives the point home. And just to make it clearer for everyone, when we talk about a haplogroup, often we're looking at markers on the Y chromosome, right? Passed directly father to son, giving a really clear lineage.
Exactly. It's a very direct line.
So when studies show that, up to 20% of Portuguese men carry a specific Y chromosome haplogroup, EM81, which is very common in North African Berber populations, well, that's not just a faint echo, is it?
No, not at all. It's a major, undeniable genetic signature, a significant chunk of the population.
Right.
And it gets even more specific. There was a genetic mapping project in 2022, I believe, which revealed that around 10 to 12% of Portuguese citizens today still show clear markers of Sephardic Jewish ancestry.
10 to 12%. even after everything that happened.
Yes, despite hundreds of years of forced assimilation, hiding identities, exile, the fact that these genetic markers are still there, still detectable, is, I think, a powerful testament to the resilience of those lineages.
So even after centuries of very deliberate historical efforts to erase a group, their history, the genes themselves kind of refuse to forget.
That's one way to put it, yeah.
That's a really profound idea to grapple with. What other kinds of maybe uncomfortable truths did your sources highlight beyond the Sephardic story?
Well, another significant and, yes, often difficult part of this genetic narrative is the African influence. We have to remember, Portugal was the first European country to really start large-scale transatlantic slavery.
Right, very dark chapter.
And they were also the first to establish African communities in Europe back in the 15th century. Geneticists have found that today, about 5% of modern Portuguese genomes contain segments that are clearly sub-Saharan African in origin.
5%. And is that evenly spread?
It seems to be more concentrated, especially around Lisbon and other southern port cities, which makes historical sense.
Okay. And beyond these broad population markers, the sources also mention something about rare alleles, like specific gene variations.
Yes, that's another fascinating angle. Portugal happens to have some of the highest frequencies in Europe for certain rare alleles. The example given was HFE mutations, which are linked to a condition called hereditary hemochromatosis.
That's the iron overload condition, right?
Correct. And what geneticists emphasize is that these specific variations usually aren't just random noise. They often point to things like founder effects or specific historical patterns. Meaning, perhaps, certain small groups migrated or specific populations went through periods where having these genes actually conferred some kind of survival advantage, even if they caused disease later. It's a powerful illustration of how health and disease today can be direct echoes of millennia of human migration, trade, even conflict, all sort of etched into our biology.
So this deep historical layering, trade, conflict, survival, migration, it's all written right there in the genome.
That's what the research strongly suggests, yes.
Given all these incredibly diverse genetic threads, North African, Sephardic, sub-Saharan African, ancient Iberian, it's fascinating, but maybe also challenging to think about how this research impacts the definition of Portuguese identity today.
It definitely raises questions.
Do the sources get into why these discussions might still stir up discomfort, even when there's clear scientific evidence?
They do touch on that. The sources point out that these findings can challenge some long-held national narratives. They might force a re-examination of what Portuguese actually means, historically and culturally.
Right. It might not fit neatly into a simple box.
Exactly. For example, historians note that back in the 1490s, King Manuel I ordered the forced conversion or expulsion of Portugal's Jewish population. Many of these families had lived in Iberia since Roman times. Centuries. But despite all that repression, their genetic imprint is still there.
You can see traces even today, apparently. Some families, particularly in regions like Beira and Trás-os-Montes, carry specific haplogroups. J1 and J2 are mentioned, which are markers strongly associated with Middle Eastern Jewish heritage.
That's right.
The genes are telling a story of endurance, even when the written or oral histories might have been deliberately obscured or lost. It makes you think about the enduring power of our deepest ancestral connections.
It really does. And this complex genetic backdrop leads us to a fascinating, though definitely hotly debated point that some geneticists and even neuroscientists have explored.
Oh, what's that?
Could some distinct Portuguese cultural traits, things like the deep emotional expression you often find, maybe a sense of fatalism or that famously melancholic feeling of saudade, could these possibly be rooted in part in shared psychological adaptations developed over centuries of hardship, exile, and survival?
Wow, that's quite a leap. Linking genetics to something like saudade.
It is a leap, and it's highly speculative.
Does the research offer any specific examples or even potential mechanisms for how something so abstract might even begin to connect to genetics?
Well, some neuroscientists do suggest that maybe generational trauma could influence epigenetic markers.
Epigenetics. So that affects how genes are expressed without changing the DNA sequence itself.
Exactly. It's about gene regulation. But it's crucial to add many others strongly caution against this line of thinking. They call it genetic romanticism.
Genetic romanticism, meaning?
Meaning it risks oversimplifying things, reducing complex culture and history down to just biology. So the big question remains, is the so-called Portuguese soul really in the genes? Or is it more profoundly held in the stories, the fado music, the shared collective memory that has shaped the nation over centuries?
It's a really powerful question to ponder, isn't it? Especially as we wrap up this deep dive. What really stands out to me is that this Portugal gene, quote unquote, isn't really just one single gene at all.
No, definitely not.
It's more like a map, isn't it? A map of resilience, a genetic story built on these incredibly rich intersections where Europe meets Africa, East meets West.
Precisely. Where the past is still very present in the biology, it carries echoes of both the pain, of displacement, of persecution, but also that undeniable pride of exploration and expansion.
Yeah.
And maybe the most important takeaway is that it reminds us identity itself is layered. It's not linear. Portugal might be a relatively small country on the edge of Europe,
Geographically, yes.
but its genome speaks volumes about survival, about blending cultures and peoples, and about the beautiful, complex messiness of human history.
Beautifully put. So maybe here's the final question for you, the listener, to reflect on. Do you believe a nation's history is truly written in its DNA?
Or is heritage perhaps something more than just blood? Something lived, something chosen, something passed down and remembered through culture and story?
Yeah, is it biology or something more?
This deep dive was really meant to spark some further thought about where we all come from, the many, many different roads that led us to where we are now. We hope you'll continue to explore these fascinating connections.